Break-even points. How many units do I need to sell to break even? To perform a break-even analysis, you'll need several basic pieces of information. What are your fixed costs per day or per month or any specified period that you want to track your break-even analysis over? Your contribution margin, the price you sell for each unit, and the variable costs that it costs to make each unit. The break-even point equals the fixed cost divided by the contribution margin. So in our example here of creating a business where we sell tamales in a farmer's market for $2 each, let's look at the tamale itself. So use the example of Mateo. Mateo likes to make tamales. He goes to a few local farmers markets and sees that the going rate for tamales is about $2 each. So Mateo has done his market research and he understands what the going rate for tamales are in the market. He wants to know how many he'll have to sell in order to make a profit. So in preparation for the next day, he knows, okay, if I make this many, I know I'm going to break even. Okay, if I sell more, then I'm going to start to have a profit. So this helps him have a good sense of how he can be profitable, and this is the purpose of a break-even analysis, to make sure he's breaking even at least. So what are his fixed costs? So if he looks and he asks the farmer's market, how much does it cost to actually set up shop in the farmer's market and sell tamales? So Mateo finds a farmer's market and asks another tamale vendor what the costs are to run a booth. To get a space, it would cost about $100 to rent this booth space for a day. It would also cost him about $100 to hire an employee for the day to run the booth, and another $50 to rent equipment, pay for permits, etc. Now, Mateo does know that he can choose to work as the employee and pay himself that $100, but he's being smart and he's putting the cost as for the worker as, in this case it would be for the manager. He would pay that manager $100 for the day. Okay? So those are the fixed costs. So the fixed costs are about $250 a day if you add up all those expenses. Okay? So what happens if Mateo works his own booth? Then he would become the manager of that booth for the day and do all the work that goes for that role. So please note that none of the costs of actually making the tamales are incorporated into this fixed cost. This is just the role of the manager and all the other costs associated with that. So sometimes labor can be put into the managerial or fixed cost. You have to ask yourself, does that work produce the actual unit that you sell? And if it doesn't, it would probably go into the fixed cost. Let's look at the sales price. So Mateo just says he wants to sell it and compete with all the other tamales. He decides that his tamale is very similar in quality, so he's going to sell it for about the same price, $2 each. What are the variable costs? So ahead of time, Mateo makes about 100 tamales at a time. That's what he figures the batch amount is to make a worthwhile amount of tamales based on the amount of kitchen space that he has to work with. And it takes him about 3 hours to make them. So this is where we define the costs. You add up all the costs to make those 100 tamales. So the flour would cost about $10, and he actually uses lard to make his tamales. So $20, corn husks, filling, right? So these are all the costs to actually produce those 100 tamales, okay? And anything else it comes up with, but these are the main ingredients. So the labor is about 3 hours to make them at $10 an hour. That's what it would cost him to hire somebody else to do it. It would cost about $30. So if he does the labor, he gets to make this money himself. But if you wanted to hire out a worker, it would cost about this much. So the total variable cost is about $100 for 100 tamales. Okay? And if you want to find out what the cost for each unit, you just divide $100 divided by 100 tamales in this batch, and you would come up with a variable cost of each tamale to be about $1 each. Okay. So contribution margin, what is the contribution margin? Each time Mateo sells a tamale, how much is he making? The contribution margin is sales price minus variable cost. The sales price is $2. That's how much he sells them for in the marketplace. And it costs him about $1 to make each unit. So he makes about $1 contribution margin off of each variable unit that he sells. So the break-even point, how many tamales must Mateo sell to break even? So the break-even is calculated the fixed cost over the time period that you want to analyze divided by the contribution margin. So the fixed costs are about $250 a day. The contribution margin is about $1 per tamale sold, or the $1 per unit. The break-even would be $250 fixed cost minus the contribution margin of $1 is Mateo would have to sell 250 tamales in one day just to break even. Now, that being said, did he make any money? The business did not make any money. They're just breaking even at this point. But if he does all the work, he's paying himself the $100 to manage the business, and he's paying himself $30 to have made the tamales. So in those two roles, as the worker, he made $30. As a manager, he made $100. As a business owner, if he sold 250 tamales, he made nothing. So this helps you identify the 3 different ways to make money in your business. Okay, so he hired himself to make the tamales. He hired himself to manage the booth. He can make money from the profit if he sells more than the break-even. So only as an owner of business is he going to make money if he sells more than the break-even point. So this is really important when we're talking about growth for your business. If Mateo is unable to sell more tamales than his break-even amount, then he will never be a profitable business. If he ever decided to create another tamale business and put it in another farmer's market, if he's only selling 250 tamales, he would never be able to make a profit by expanding his business. So if you are thinking about growing your business, you have to understand what is the break-even point after you calculate the cost for paying an employee to either do the work or manage the business. This gives you a sense as an entrepreneur, like how successful this business is. If Mateo did all this work and he found out that the other businesses are only selling 250 tamales, and after running this type of business, he's only selling 250 tamales, it would never make sense for him to expand his business to a bunch of other farmers markets because he would never make money if he had to pay someone else to do the work. Yes, he's making money to do the work and be the manager, but he's not being profitable as a business. Does that make sense? I hope so. Next up is runway length. How do I know when I'm about to run out of money?